Well, improving superannuation balances for Indigenous people will be top of the agenda at the 2024 First Nations Super Summit in Sydney next week.
First Nations people generally have significantly lower superannuation balances than other Australians. Phil Usher is the Chief Executive Officer of the First Nations Foundation, which is coordinating the summit, and he joins us this morning. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me here.
Good to have you along. Tell us, what is the scope of the challenge facing Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people when it comes to superannuation?
Yeah, I think if we look systemically, like straight away at the system, you have preservation age, the age that you can access your superannuation, somewhere between 60 and 65, depending on when you were born. Life expectancy for Aboriginal male is 71, so it doesn't present as a really good buy-in opportunity for the community. And to put that in perspective for, I guess, mainstream Australia, it'd be like telling the rest of Australia you can't access your super till you're 73. And I think if we think and imagine in those terms, there's going to be a lot of disengagement in the super sector. So just straight away, the way that it's structured, it kind of excludes First Nations people.
And there has been, I think, a court case to test that very question, which I understand failed to move the dial on it. But is this, are you calling for some broader reform or thinking around the preservation age of superannuation, specifically for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people?
I think it's time for the conversation around that, those life expectancies, and that 71's an average. In some of these communities, it's 40, 50-year-olds that are passing away. So it really depends on where we're looking. I'm not sure if we make it First Nations based or if we look at it as maybe a postcode based, because some of those regional remote areas, like I said, that's much lower life expectancy. So if we maybe shift away from the race conversation and say all Australians that are in these postcodes might be able to access their super a bit earlier because they're all suffering from those lower life expectancies.
Yeah, or perhaps some specific conditions or chronic disease, etc., that might be afflicting some people. The Retirement Income Review found significantly fewer Indigenous people have superannuation accounts, and the number of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people with superannuation set for 74% for men and 58% for women. These are pretty staggering figures, aren't they?
Yeah, they're pretty confronting, considering Australia's touted as having, a top-tier superannuation and retirement system, which it is, and it works well for a lot of people, but there's a lot that kind of fall through the cracks as well. And I think, again, from that top statement where there's such disengagement, we have a look at the early access to super scheme during COVID, and our data was showing us that 40% of First Nations people accessed that money because they didn't think they'd be able to access it again. So any opportunity they're getting to access, there's just real disengagement, and I think that contributes to those lower balances.
Yeah, and because that was the other thing that review found, wasn't it, that for the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people with superannuation accounts, generally the balances are significantly lower. So you pointed out that part of that might be money that was taken out, access during COVID, but are there other reasons that you've identified for that?
Yeah, I think looking at the type of jobs as well, a lot of First Nations people will be in kind of the non-for-profit community spaces, which is all dependent on funding, and you move around from different jobs depending where the funding sort of goes. Our big Super Day Out program that we've run since 2014 has helped connect First Nations people with $25 million in lost super. So I think there's a lot of balances out there, multiple balances in the ecosystem. Some move to the tax office. So I think there's parts of just being the type of work that they do and moving from different jobs based on that community sector approach, that there's a lot of lost balances and they're not being rolled into one account either.
So you were able to find $25 million?
Yeah. Yeah,
that's incredible.
Yeah, that's massive. And our rough estimates is there's probably about $500 million that's out there in lost super for First Nations people, just based on those stats and the number of communities, because that's across 24 communities. So it's almost $1 million each community we're going to. And just connecting people with that superannuation they didn't know existed.
Well, there are hundreds of other communities around the country. So you've touched on perhaps the need for some sort of reform about the circumstances under which people could access superannuation. But what else do you think needs to happen? What's going to be the focus of this summit next week?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, there's a thing we do in culture is we just listen to the knowledge holders. So we've got 25 First Nations people from all over Australia. We've got 2 Indigenous panels, and they're just going to talk us through the day-to-day experiences that they're seeing out on the ground. There's things like deceased estates, someone passing away, and then you not knowing where your partner's superannuation is. but the tax office won't tell you, and there's a little change to the legislation that can be made to help navigate that process a bit easier. Identification, past history has seen our old people kind of removed and given these birth dates of January 1st, July 1st, that doesn't match up with the normal identification that's required from superannuation sector. So there's a whole range of issues that I think will be coming out and discussed on the day, and we just want people in the sector to really listen to those and think, what can we do next once we know those issues are out there?
And the politicians and bureaucrats as well, I suspect. Phil, thank you so much for joining us. Good luck with your summit there.
Not a problem, thank you.
Phil Usher is the CEO of the First Nations Foundation. Thank you.